All right, thank you for staying with Daybreak. Conversations always continues even during the break. But now we want to shift gears and talk about sexual harassment in the workplace. How far is too far? And this is coming just after court recently awarded a Standard journalist, Tony Mushama, 9 million damages after it found that he was defamed by 2 women who accused him of sexual harassment. And also, very recently, just last week,
That's right.
2 Kenyan rugby players were found guilty of rape. Milimani Chief Magistrate Martha Mutuku, in the verdict delivered in camera, ruled that Frank Wanyama and Alex Olaba had raped a woman, and they are supposed to be sentenced. But now when we bring this to the workplace, there are always these policies against sexual harassment. But why is it so hard to report, and where do you draw the boundaries? And I'd like to start with Tabitha, because you're in a very male-dominated field. Where do you draw the boundaries? Is it a conversation you have that I am more of a handshake person, not a hug? But what impact does that have on your colleagues?
I think, first of all, it's a very complicated thing. I think, well, I wouldn't say I speak as a woman, but I think in general what happens is it's very difficult to talk about these boundaries, and until something happens, you don't really think that you have to do it. So for instance, as a woman, when I am dressing, I have to think, is this going to make me look a certain way? Is this going to present me the way I want to look like? And so working in security, what has worked for me over the years has been, I am very expressive. So if something makes me uncomfortable, I tell you about it. I also try as much as I can to be careful in terms of how I speak. So someone might say something, and if it makes me uncomfortable, then I have to be very careful in terms of how I respond. And this does not mean that that is why, for instance, I have not been a victim, because you might do everything right, but then something still goes wrong.
That's right. Yeah.
I think the most important thing that needs to happen is for people to talk about this more often, for us to raise sons that are respectful of women, and even daughters that are respectful of men, because I know of incidents where men have been victims, and it becomes very difficult for people to talk about it. And in my field, in security, in my own experience has been good. I've gotten mentorship from people who are male. They've been very useful in terms of helping me learn about the field and all that. But I know there's people who've not had that opportunity. And I think what needs to happen is very strict legislation, which we already have. Now implementation of that, to make sure that if anyone, say, is found guilty of this, then they are held accountable for it. Because we've seen incidents where people, I worked in HR at one point in Kilifi, and issues of sexual violence and abuse and assault were very high there because of the kind of industry it was. It was agricultural, and sometimes you have to make very tough decisions when you're working in human resources. And as much as many, in fact, I think every organization has a policy about it, but it's not effectively implemented.
Were there instances where you felt like it was being used for vendetta?
In my own case?
Yeah, when you're the HR around Kilifi area.
Okay, what happens is when someone complains about someone, then you have to get as much information as you can that incriminates that person. And so I think what we need to do is to be very careful when it comes to, just like any other investigation that happens, where we collect enough information and then use that to build a case. I think it's very important so that we do not have people just saying that this happened to them when it did not happen. But at the same time, we need to create a space that allows victims to be able to talk about what happened to them without them feeling like, one, it is their fault, or two, they could have done something to stop this.
Okay. Jessy, you work in arts, culture, media sector, sectors that pride themselves on openness, informal structures, free expression, free speech. How does one draw the line in the sector that you operate in? For you in comedy, you know, sometimes even in terms of the jokes that are made and so forth.
It's supposed to be funny.
It's supposed to be.
It's not.
So when does it stop being funny? And how do you deal with your fans, for example?
Well, Ours is actually it's the opposite of what women face in the normal working areas. For comedy, we do comedy, and our comedy is vetted. You have to have a script, and there's a team there that vets your jokes. And the best thing is, after you've done your jokes, they must be edited. If they border around sexuality and things like that, or religion, feminism, we have to be very careful what we air. Yeah. And that's why we've survived for so long on air. So in case a joke is inappropriate, it's never aired. And even if you did it at the live recording, it's okay. You might have done it, but just know that the producers will deal with you immediately after, because you are vetted and you are not supposed to speak like that. And sometimes there's some mistakes that happen, you know, and a slip of the tongue on the live recording, and might actually slip to go on air. But but those are very rare mistakes that we do, because we are very careful about what we shoot and what we
But
air.
then there's also the practical bit of it, of fans who now just simply swarm you.
Yes.
And some of them may extend their handshake beyond the elbow.
Yeah, that one happens a lot. I can for sure say sexual harassment happens to the people that are famous or popular, or whichever way you want to put it. And it has happened to me severally. But now who do I go report to?
Yeah, true.
Who do I go report to? I'm a comedian. These are fans. I have to understand, first of all, who you need fan. Maybe they're attracted to what I said. They don't know Jasper Mudomi, the one who carries MC Jessy. You know, they may just know MC Jessy, this guy who makes me happy, who dances on stage, who shakes his stomach. They don't understand. It's for entertainment.
Yeah.
The reason why I'm doing all that is I want you to be entertained. I want you to be happy.
So it's an act at that
It's an act. It's an act. Will Smith acts as an alien.
Yeah.
He's not an alien. Yeah, Lupita acted when she was fighting. I don't think she knows how to fight that much. You know, it's acting. So when I'm there doing my jokes, my acts, I'm acting. I'm trying to make you happy. But people now take that to be that's who you are.
Yeah.
And after the show, they come. That's why behind the backstage, you have a lot of security. Because you know, if these people come, that's it. For me, it has happened because I normally go to the audience. When I go on stage, I go to the audience to say hi. Yeah. And some people pinch me. And most of them are ladies. Besides that, touching, they can touch inappropriately.
Yeah. And you don't react at that point. You
run away.
You're on camera, of course.
Yeah, you're on camera, you run away. And we don't air such. Yeah, they touch us. You're walking at the aisle, upper katikati, the audience, this side and this side. And we're talking of so many people seated, about 5,000-6,000.
Yeah.
You walk in between, they'll touch you.
They'll touch you.
They'll
and
touch
you don't even know who picks
Yeah,
up
sometimes when you turn, you'll see it's a lady.
Yeah.
Men don't.
Yeah.
It's a lady. So unaenda tu. And when we meet them, they hug you. They don't like handshakes.
Yeah.
When you shake their hands, wanafikiria uko na maringo.
Uko na maringo. And that's the other thing I wanted Tabitha to come in with, because then is it subjective? There are those who would say that I'm a handshake person. There are those who say I'm a hugs person. And then there are those who say, MC Jessy, that's what he does. He gives you a long hug. So does everyone define what their consent is?
Everyone should have a right to define. When I was in high school, for instance, we were all shaking hands. And then when I went to USIU, then it totally changed. And over time, I became a hug person. Yeah. And for me, that's okay, as long as one, I know you, or if I don't know you, I feel comfortable around you. But then it gets to a point where there's people who totally don't want to be hugged. They just want their space, and we should respect that. So I think it shouldn't have to be looked at from a perspective of, oh, this person is too proud to hug us. It should be, this person likes the space, let's respect them. In the same way, you wouldn't force someone to do something like eat eggs. For instance, I don't like eggs. So you can't force me to eat eggs that are boiled because I know they're not good for me. So we should allow people to be free to do what they want, as long as it doesn't infringe on the rights of other people.
Maliba, let me bring you in on this discussion. Whenever you see revelations on social media about sexual harassment and so forth, whether they are true or not, if you look at the comments, you're more likely to see a lot more people then suddenly get courage to begin to share what they've been going through.
Yes.
Does that indicate that as a country, we still are not at a point where people feel safe sharing about the challenges they've gone through, calling out others, etc. In a society where you might have a very close friend who you know is sexually harassing people, but you keep quiet about it. Talk to us about that, and of course, how far can the law really take you?
Yeah.
And so forth, as a public policy analyst.
I think, first of all, I will actually make this statement out of the spaces I hold, that you have not grown if you have not had a sex scandal of your own.
In what ways?
It's a psychology issue.
Caused by you or brought upon you?
Whether it's caused by you, whether you found yourself in it or somehow.
That's in the political field.
No.
Let's make this very clear.
I'm just saying, it's actually said in psychology that you have not grown if you've not had one of your own. And we're not talking about a high level. You know, probably just being found with a very funny text, being caught looking at somebody, or as in, this just everybody has got that particular hour. It's a process of initiation.
I don't know if I agree with that. Carry on.
I don't know how we qualify this statement.
Literally everybody I know has had sexual harassment in their lives, whether it's a man or a woman.
Everyone you know.
Everyone I know. If you get to circles where men can speak up, like Jessy is here telling you, and for those of us who have operated in public space, it's even much higher. But then, you know how men are now feeling about the sexual offences laws and that particular frame. That is exactly how women feel about our political space. You know, men today, and you'll actually feel in their cases, they feel like the law is biased against the boy child and such, which is true to some extent, because as at the time when we were enacting that, what was at fore was sexual violence, of course, but most of the time orchestrated against women. It still happens. But for men, we have been socialized that you do not come to speak of it. You know, even as he speaks around it, some Meru man somewhere in Chuka will be feeling like this man is letting us down. Men don't say that. They should actually be out there. But I know that men have been victims, and there are a lot of them. They speak about these issues, but then no one really takes them serious because of socialization. So how far does the law take us? What should we do and what should we not do? For men, for example, if you are to find yourself in a place where you are being accused as a man, I can tell you that almost 80% of the men I know is that they will choose to walk away and not engage. Because no one will believe you.
Okay.
And that is actually being used against a lot of men, because something that happened in secret, the two of you are talking until you are not able to probably provide something. And then now it's being pulled on you. Now, how do I go and tell the world that this actually happened? So it's something, the politics of sex is such that it's very complex. You do not know exactly how to handle it, especially in a Me Too world, like you said. So somebody else who actually says they have been quiet waits until something else shows up, and then they join that gravy train. Men,
but don't you feel that perpetrators of sexual harassment will hide under arguments like yours?
You see,
because they will easily say men were under attack, men were under siege, but yet, Maliba, you know, you have lady friends who quit jobs, who are not able to advance, who you even want sometimes usitafute kazi huko. You will be frustrated.
And I also know men who have left working spaces because somebody else who wanted something and you are not able to provide, or cornered you, you are not in a position. I also know a lot of men. This argument goes either way. We are not saying that sexual offenses do not happen. They do happen. But exactly, this thing is a matter of law, it's a matter of morals, and it's a matter of culture. How that matrix works out, how you are able to sieve out and see what works and what doesn't work, is very complex, because in some cases, it's a matter of consent. But then it's used against you. I'm actually telling you, like, for example...
You want to object, okay.
In all cases. It should not be in some cases. It should always be...
You know, I'm saying it's a matter of consent that is withdrawn thereafter. You know, when we talk about slut shaming, people think that slut shaming is about women. But I can tell you that there's a lot of sex shaming for men. You know, you look so smart, putting on a good coat like himself. You walk around here, like Waiga here. And then somebody somewhere just says that Waiga touched me inappropriate. All of a sudden, you feel like you want to go down. When that happened, you are not in control at that particular time. So, I think going forward, men also need to speak up, because unfortunately, there is no data on men and how sexual offences actually affect men. There's no empirical data at the moment. So they just make noise. And so long as it's not in law at the moment, we really need to make the law totally gendered. Because the sexual offences laws that exist at the moment, I would say they are gendered in one way. Because at the time when they came out, that was what was happening. And then we are becoming very liberal. So there's a concept called FTP, forced to penetrate. Somebody will tell you, you know, you can still get an erection.
And allows you to
go to all the way, but deep inside. You know, you cannot, for example, erase the sex you had. You know, like after the whole process, you feel like, I have actually been violated in this process. I actually was lured into it. How do I unsex myself out of it? It's not. It is a wound that stays with you as a person. You move around, and men are as hurt as women. But we do not want to have this conversation openly because you will be lynched online. Because KOT will actually descend on you and you will actually be made to feel cold.
You're not a man enough.
Like you're not a man enough. It's just a man like any other. And we come up and we generalize this debate. Like we said, this thing is subjective. It's so fluid. It applies to an individual as a person. So either way, as we look at it, and the ruling that happened with Tony Mochama the other day, I think that is very progressive. That people can actually go out there.
What about the other ruling?
That's what I'm telling you. The other one is almost the law and not an exception. It's almost a norm that every time a sexual offense happens, that man did it. And that when a man says it didn't happen,
like
we say, no, he's lying. So that it's like we are the only predators in this. When we know that there are hyenas and feces on the other side that are lacking all over.
Wow.
And I think it's important we let our guests know that we did have another female guest. Susan Owio was supposed to join us,
so but it's balanced.
That was the plan.
However, Waiga, Kabla, before we move to something else on what you're saying, let me add to this. I come from a very patriarchal society whereby men, in Meru, men are the topmost. And we are taught during our initiation time how to respect women. And Meru culture has always put into us the virtues of a woman and the place of a man in the society, that we are supposed to protect women. And now I came with that ideology. I came like that in Nairobi with that ideology in my mind, knowing that women can't attack. Men are supposed to protect the women. And so when I went into comedy, our background is very serious. I'm sure, I don't know whether both of you have ever experienced this, being on TV and being known, where your fans come and they jump on you. You don't know them. As you said, you need to draw a boundary, whether you're a handshake person or a hug. There are some who don't care about those boundaries. They'll come and jump on you, especially young girls. Yangu inakuanga pia ya wamama wa Kiambu. Mama, you just come here. You wewe kuja. You know, they wanakuvuta by force, and young girls. And when you're talking about coming from that conservative society where we know women don't attack, it is men. So where do I draw the line when talking about laws? About mimi nitaenda kushtaki wapi? I'm there, mimi mafans wangu wanakuja, they throw themselves on me. There are some who are genuine, like, hey, hi, sasa. They just want to hug you. Na wataka hapo, watakwama kidogo. But there are others who have ill motives. Wako, nakutananga nao, anakushika na anakushika, unashikamana. You know, you feel, this one, no, it's not good. So where do I go? And it is sexual. It is sexual.
It's harassment, but you don't know.
Wait. We need a
and there's always been issues around, from the HR perspective, threats to demotions and job losses, or even getting those job promotions based on sexual favors. How do you balance those two? Because they're the same instances that have happened in reverse. Somebody says that they want sexual favors and then they get promoted. And then somebody says they want sexual favors and they don't give in and then they're demoted. How do you handle those two?
I think it all has to do with organizational culture. Like organizations need to be clear on what kind of culture they have, what kind of values they uphold, and how effective they are in terms of implementation of their policies. So by law, every organization should have a policy on sexual harassment. But how many organizations implement that? And organizations must create an environment where a person, whether male or female is able to come out and speak confidently without fear that the job will get affected because they came and talked about what happens to them. And this can only start if we change our mindset about how we approach this issue. So he mentioned that the law sort of favors women more than men, because when this law was put in place, that was where we were coming from. But the best thing about this law is it also provides in section 38, I think 38 talks about what will happen to someone who makes false claims. So I think what we need to do as organizations, or what organizations need to do, is make sure that every employee that raises these issues is able to, one, talk about them, and then the investigations are done by people that are neutral and objective in terms of wanting to find out what really happened to this employee. And there should be clear guidelines on what happens to you if you're found doing this in the workplace.
I know we might not have too much time, but I had a question from Maliba, just to pick up from the previous points that he raised. Maliba, for you, what is a greater concern when you talk about something like discrimination or racism? Would you be more concerned at looking at how to equalize the balance between Western nations and Africa, or vice versa? And I'll give you an example of this. Right now, one of the biggest discussions is about how Western nations discriminate against African countries when it comes to visas. And there's a big campaign out there, how hard it is for you to travel abroad. But we know that it's also hard to visit some African countries. If you were to prioritize, what would you push more for? For Africans to be able to go to the West, or for Westerners to be able to come to Africa? I ask that question to then link it with something else.
For me, I believe in the open world concept.
Okay, open world concept.
It should not just be about the West or coming to the global South.
Who needs more help?
Well, it depends with what you call help. What help?
Because there are those who would argue that as much as there is discrimination against men, that still women, from a power perspective, still have a longer way to go.
Now, unfortunately, when it comes to the politics of sex, I'll call that.
Yes, in fact,
the matrix is around three things. Morals, something that you might not be able to brush in very bold brush around. You cannot paint it in very bold brushes. Then there's the place of law. Then there's the place of culture. When it comes to power play around sex, today, in the modern day world, the women actually hold power. Like I've just told you, currently in our setting, there is no concept called FTP, forced to penetrate. It doesn't exist.
Okay. And I'll urge you to use rosy language. Remember that the slot children are at home.
That's why I'm actually using FTP as in an initial to actually just get that point home. We do not yet have that concept here. That you can still get to this thing past, after the fact, and still have been aggressively brought into it. When you talk about the aggressive targeting and everything else, when Jesus speaks here, I know he's being very careful, and he speaks to just the embrace, the touch, and it ends up there. But I can tell you that quite a number of people end up after the fact and realize that it's still a violation. A lot of them. When you speak about the FTP, in our concept, it doesn't exist. On the other end, it's already catered for. And we must say that society is biased, especially the global South. Because we have lied to men that they are lions. They are not. They are very feeble. That's why if you go to the mortuaries, there are a lot of them there. The people dying in mass are men. So even as we try to tell them, okay, you guys are the strongest and everything else, they are hurting deeply. You know, if you look at the cycle of violence, you can always pin it to sex. Unfortunately, we don't want to say that repeatedly. But the cycle of violence and the way it happened, somehow sex features somewhere. So if we do not liberalize this conversation, if men do not come up, if we are not going to be bold to speak about these issues, then the Tony Mochamas of this world will be rotting somewhere in jail. One of the reasons why even the court system is trying to bring down the age of consent is primarily around the boy child. Because there are a lot of teenagers who end up in jail. And at that particular time when it was happening, they were all teenagers. They agreed at that particular level. But the law, we will talk about the Boston institutions and everything that works around that. But it happened while you were in 17. By the time you get to 19, we have to look at you as an adult. And the Chief Justice said that clearly. One of the reasons why judiciary is actually talking about bringing down the age of consent is primarily around that, because the people who have ended up suffering a lot They're actually boys. So we are not going to run away from it. It's true, violence as sex as a weapon has been used in war. A number of men in the culture has actually made sex as a weapon to use against women. But now women actually have turned the heat on men. People are actually losing their jobs. People are moving out. People are being shamed. And men cannot stand out and say that on this particular day it happened. If men started the Me Too movement, Twitter would break, Facebook would break. But then are there structures to even support that? Today, if that happened, and the way he actually has said here, if he were to just point a finger, what is Jessy Fisi? And then so many other feces will actually show up and a lot of testimonials. And people are likely to believe a woman when it comes to sex than a man. If I should, and I tell you that this one was a honeypot, you are tricked into it and then now you're being turned left, right and center and you're being manipulated. These are the dynamics we don't want to speak about, but we have to. That is why I think Tony needs to speak up loudly. More men need to start speaking about these issues because careers have been wrecked. The people in public space, I can tell you, if you are to speak to members of parliament, they will tell you how they actually are beaten around these issues. The people who are hired.
But the issue of being tricked, and I'm sorry if I have to interrupt you.
No, I'm saying not
tricked.
You see,
tricked speaks of.
Look at this. You see, that's why I said it's going to become a very difficult conversation because there's the place of morals. You can bring in religion, because if you look at tricking, for you it will be like I, as Maura, I'm a Christian. I am only a husband to one wife. Some of us might not be ascribing to that. We believe we could be free. So for you, you will be like, I was actually giving you the example of the people in public space who, like him, who have got a lot of people rushing to them. So it's consensual until it gets to a level where today you will have to take care of something else. And if you are not, then you are taken in circles, and the way the legal infrastructure exists is that you are likely to come out a loser. So you comply. There are so many men who are complying and playing ball.
Okay. Jessy, has that been one of your concerns, that you think if you bring this up to the fore, it will be turned on you?
Yeah, sometimes you feel the same way. Reading the story of Neymar Jr., why wouldn't you be scared of bringing sexual harassment about someone? You know, I've not been sexually harassed like this happened to me, mtualini trick, as he's saying, and something happened. No.
But he has been touched. That is sexual harassment.
Yeah, touchings may happen. Mara mingi. And there's another one that you said that perhaps I may be talking safely, but it happens. You can be harassed through mobile phones. The texting, the pictures that are sent. Wahiga, for sure, I can tell you, isimu. Not that. But yeah, you sent some inappropriate pictures. So what do? You didn't ask the person to send you, but you know, they just sent you. Where did they get
a question for you?
And that is where you communicate with this person and tell them, I did not like the photos that you sent me. Please do not send me such photos again. And if they continue doing that, then you use that as evidence to build your case. But then if you get those photos
and you encourage, you're like,
unatuma emoji, then you're sort of allowing that to happen.
Wait.
Just speaks about stalking.
You just delete and that's it.
But you see, you see, in today's age where anything can be used against you, you need to protect yourself at all times.
No, I don't want to agree with you on that one, because as he said, a man will be perceived guilty of any sexual
scandal. But then you will have the evidence. Like in this case, where someone is texting you,
evidence about something that happens to them.
Then now these men need to come out and use that to encourage other men to come out and talk about it. Because what happened with these two movements,
delete and move on.
But
because the moment you put it in the
evidence every day, that's going to be your work.
Yeah, that will be the work.
But it's important so that when someone raises a case against you, then you have evidence to cover yourself. And then the law will be there to back you up. But then
we actually need to bring the law to catch up with the situation. Like I've told you, there are already other concepts that do not exist in our law as it is today.
And that is true. But
my content mostly goes around women, okay? I like also entertaining women. When I do jokes, sometimes when I do this one, I want to target the ladies today, because they are our market and they are my preference when it comes to content. Now, you start, doing all that because of law. I'm also messing my work. Sitaki kupanda on stage and then guys are like, hiki ni kile kinasemanga stories za wasichana. Ukikitumia message or picture, then okay, and you lose. Nitakosa pesa, my friend.
Yeah. Good. I know there are so many points here, but we really are out of time. Close, please.
I think one of the most effective ways of dealing with this issue will be
advise these gents, please. They are crying out here.
Will be to have reproductive health education in schools, which will help raise children that know about consent and respect the other gender, and know that it is okay for them to speak out. So I think the movement that was there by some religious factions and some organizations feeling that this is not part of our culture, it should not be introduced, it's going to mislead children. I think we need to look at it from an objective perspective where we know if we don't do this, then kids will learn about these things elsewhere. And then we need, working in security, I think we should always have our backs covered at all times. So it's very important that you keep that information. Earlier this week, I was called in to give expert analysis on an issue about cybersecurity, and what I said was, when someone is cyberbullying you, you need to collect that information, that evidence, so you can use it to build your case. And I believe the same goes with sexual harassment, because as a man, yes, it is difficult to be believed, but then if you have evidence, and the law says that you should prove this case beyond reasonable doubt, if you have that evidence, then you're one step ahead of this person that might come looking for you. But I think we need to get to a point where we don't look at it from a perspective of men versus women. It should be everyone is equal and respected and protected by the law, so that men are not victimized and women are not victimized.
1 minute.
Just clearly, we need to say that, first of all, this discussion has got a lot of passion than facts. Once you're talking about sex, it's so much about passion. It's a very passionate discussion. You might not be able to get facts, but there is need to actually balance this so that there is equality before the law. For men, unfortunately, in this particular situation, it's not like anybody's targeting you, but then the infrastructure is that men might not really be believed easily, and it's going to be difficult. We need to tell guys that you have got a freedom of choice. You choose what to do with who, where, but you are not free from the consequences that come out of it. So there is always a Potiphar's wife somewhere. Please run.
Clay Muganda, journalist, is telling you there's already an equivalent of, a men's equivalent of Me Too. It's called Men Too. So join it.
Yeah, we should.
Okay, so Clay Muganda, we've seen your message.
Jessy, 1 minute.
Before we even bring in the law, I would like to say it's about the person's morals. You have to know yourself. What do you stand for? In an area where you work, what do you stand for? What are your morals? Can those sexual harassments bring you down? Do you actually tolerate them? As I told you, for me, for anything that would come, I'll just shut off. I'll see it's an inappropriate picture. I won't even download it. I'll just delete because I'm not interested. Maybe Zile niko interested in myself. But what I'm saying,
it's double standards.
You just need to know yourself and know where your morals draw the line. And then, of course, I know where I work. I work in a place where by the time I was coming here, at least nimesalimiwa na watu watatu. And most of them were ladies. And it's 6 o'clock in the morning.
What about by 6 p.m.?
So, what about by 6 p.m.? So you need to know yourself. I need to understand these people are my fans. Nothing beyond being a fan. Wakikuja ni handle the way they're coming. It has to be a conscious thing that you have to put in yourself. Know yourself. Put some guidelines around yourself. You don't need to put it upon the other person, and know that wakikuja hivi, I'll handle them this way. Otherwise, in our industry, you can't survive.
All right.
And then even in the place of work, put some security measures to protect your morals. What do you do? For example, in our place, we make sure, besides kushinda mkiburugana na watu when they're coming to argue, why don't you put security? It's not that we are afraid of people, but it's protecting ourselves from some unnecessary,
commotion.
That can happen to you. Carrying some girls in your car.
Great. What have you said?
Yeah. All right. MC Jessy, comedian and MC, thank you so much for making time. Tabitha Mwangi, security expert, asante sana. She said she doesn't prefer that.
Head of security programs.
Yes. And Arnold Maliba, public policy analyst, which he also says Secretary General TNA.
I don't say I am a Secretary General of a party.
TNA party.
Arnold Maliba, Secretary General TNA.
You must actually say TNA party. Very, very clearly.
Trevor, you're harassing him.
Yeah.
All right, let's take a look at your feedback. This is what you're saying on our SMS line 22422, and the hashtag is Daybreak. Samo
Indy says, boundaries or no boundaries, moral supersedes all, not even legislation. One becomes the product of his or her own thoughts.
Okay, Engineer Lazaro, dealing with grave cases like sexual offences needs specially trained squad, not too much thorax by administration police and untrained administrators like chiefs. This trend will only make sexual offences a weapon to bring down an opponent. Right. I believe use the word thorax.
Let's see what the SMS lines are saying. 22422. George Kiveli from Lugari says the issue is not about boundaries, but is about self-respect and moral upbringing.
Okay. I'm surprised that we haven't gotten more women responding. Those have been...
Women are tired of talking about these things.
They're tired of talking about these things.
We're so tired because we don't think we need to be talking about the same thing every day. Like, it gets to a point where you just become numb to it in a way, which is very dangerous because there's a lot of women...
the predators.
Yes, and then there's a lot of women walking around with wounds that have lifelong implications. But it's because we're tired of talking about it.
Okay.
We should talk to make it...
Men talk, women talk.
Yeah. But wait, here, to close. What I will say is, when it comes to morals, the first thing that comes to mind is To Kill a Mockingbird, where Atticus, one of the characters, is described as being the same man he was at home as he was outside. And so I think as men and women, we need to be the same people that we are. Like, sell yourself the way you want to be bought. So if you want to sell yourself as a person that does not respect the other sex, or even people of the same sex, then by all means do that, but know the law will catch up with you. And if you want to sell yourself as that kind of a person, then put measures in place that help you do that.
All right.
But that's way to wrap up.
This issue about moral is very elastic. Because whose morals are we talking about?
Okay, all right. That's a conversation for another day. We have to leave it there. Thank you so much for making time. Yeah, and it's true. Whose morals are we talking about when we're talking about morality? But it's time for Web Wars with Kimani Bogwa. They're already in studio. See you in just a bit.